My scariest encounter occurred when I was in middle school. I'm 22 now. I was about 14 years old and was always at my best friend's house. According to my friend and her family, weird things happened frequently at their house, though I thought nothing of the events. My friend often told me stories about hearing footsteps in the attic, cords becoming unplugged for no reason, and lights being switched off. I felt safe in the new house and had no reason to be scared. One afternoon, I decided to take a shower in my friend's parents' bathroom. I went into their room, locked the bedroom door, walked past the sinks, and locked myself into the bathroom with the shower and the toilet. I made sure that there was no way my friend's perverted little brother could get into the bathroom. I started the shower and stripped down. Like most people, I had a routine. I started by washing my hair. I glanced out of the clear, non-tempered glass door while massaging the shampoo into my scalp and saw what appeared to be my friend standing there. Shocked, I did a double take and then proceeded to tell her to get out. Before I could finish my sentence, the blonde girl in the white robe turned around and disappeared without ever opening or closing the door. After hurrying to get out of the shower, I asked my friend why she was in the bathroom. She said that she had never entered the bathroom. No one else in the house was blonde like her. The event was so shocking that I was unable to take showers in showers with clear glass for about 6 years. After the 6 years, now I put towels over the sides of the shower so I can't see outside of the glass. I even had to go to therapy for this event. People have blamed it on steam. People have blamed it on the glass. I know what I saw. It was only about 2 feet in front of me. Ghost in the shower. When I was small, about 10, I went to go visit my aunt. She always had stories to tell me, and I would always tell her to tell me ghost stories. But she wouldn't because my mother was always there, and she was really afraid of virtually any ghost stories. Well, that time I went, my mom stepped out so I was able to talk to her alone. She told me that when she was about 14 or 15, she went to take a shower. The showers where she lived were different. Instead of them inside, they were outside. She said that she took her buckets of water and headed outside. She started to take off her clothes when she saw a black figure over her. She thought it was the shadow of a bird, so she ignored it when it disappeared. She started to wet her hair when she noticed a person's feet right next to her. She thought at first someone got in, but when she looked up, she saw a black man dressed as an Indian with scratches all over his face and arms. She didn't know what to do, so she stayed frozen in place and just stared as the man looked at her from head to toe, naked. That's when she screamed, and the man disappeared into thin air. She told my granny, but they could not do anything. From then on, she didn't see the man, but she did see shadows. I asked her if it was true, or if she was making it up, but she promised me it was true. Not so long ago was I in her house by myself when I noticed black shadows there. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but I kept seeing them. That's when I believed the story was true. So, I've read stories on this site forever now, and finally thought I'd join a few weeks ago. I didn't think I'd be posting so soon. This happened to me just the other day, and has thoroughly freaked me out. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment, in the heart of downtown Humble, a small suburb outside of Houston, Texas, about 6 months ago. Now, nothing here has really bothered me, although I've noticed things happening, things moving without me or the 2 other people that live here, moving them. There are cold spots. In my mother's bedroom, I do not feel comfortable in there whatsoever and avoid going in there most of the time. I'm not one who is too jumpy or easily scared either. Anyway, back to my story. It was late. I'd been having nightmares and tossing and turning all night. I woke around 4 with a headache and just decided to give up on sleep. I quietly sneaked out of bed and retrieved some clothes in the dark as to not wake my sleeping boyfriend. My mother was still at work at this time, so I was pretty much alone in the apartment. I really felt uneasy and couldn't figure out why. I went to the bathroom and locked the door behind me, something I don't normally do. I started the shower and got in. I had just finished washing my hair and wiping water out of my eyes when I noticed a shadow standing in the doorway, way too tall to be either Nicholas or my mother. I stood there, staring at it for a good minute and a half. I swear it was just standing there, glaring at me from the other side of the shower curtain. Now, I remind you, I'd be awake for about 10 minutes, 3 of these spent in hot water, so this couldn't have been a dream. I blinked to get water out of my eye, and it was gone, just poof, as if nothing was there at all. I quickly finished my shower and haven't showered with the door shut since. I'm 23 years old, and I've had experiences with the paranormal throughout my entire life. I'm used to seeing things in the corner of my eye and things like that. But this shadow completely shook me to my core. I felt unsafe in my home, and I'm not happy about it whatsoever. When I was alone, I calmly stated out loud that I don't mind sharing the space with any spirits that are here, as long as they don't try to scare or harm any of us, and that anything negative is not welcome here and should leave right now. I then burnt some sage and walked throughout the apartment, but that hasn't seemed to help. I just have this overwhelming sense of doom and sadness since I've ever done so. Any suggestions or advice would help me greatly. I've asked the apartment manager if she knows anything about this place, and she told me that it was built in the early 30s or 40s, and that it, at the time, had been an old folks' home. Other than that, is all I'm aware of. Thanks for reading. This following occurrence happened in early 2011. In fact, it's a string of occurrences that happened then. E, our youngest daughter, and Z, our youngest son, were still living at home at this time. Our oldest daughter and her husband came over for dinner and movie night. Z's girlfriend was also there. About midway into the movie, E decided she would take a shower and go to bed because she had to get up early for classes the next day. She said she was going to use my shower so the hallway bath would be open for when anyone needed it. The rest of us watched the movie to the end. When it was over, I went to the kitchen to get some drinks for everyone. As I walked into the kitchen, I heard a faint cry. It alarmed me. I immediately thought of E, so I headed down to the hall. I looked into her bedroom and she wasn't there. Thinking she was taking a long shower, I turned to my room. When I entered my bedroom, I heard E scream, "Mom!" I opened the bathroom door and right away saw E sitting on the shower floor. She was almost hysterical, screaming, "I can't get the shower door open!" When I grabbed the door handle, a sort of electric static feeling shot through my hand and arm. It was painful enough to cause me to drop my arm, but the door easily came open. E said she was washing her hair when she heard what sounded like someone opening the bathroom door. She said she hollered that she was in the bathroom. She peered through the frosted shower door the best she could. The room door looked closed. She thought she heard a low, deep laugh. It freaked her out so much, she decided to end her shower right then. She said she tried to open the shower door, but it would not open. She pushed and shoved and even kicked the door. It would not budge. My husband and I both tested the shower door over and over again, slamming it, closing it softly, trying to get it to stick, trying to prove to her and ourselves it was just a tricky door. We would not come up with any reasonable explanation for it. I'm not sure if this had anything to do with the above occurrence. However, a few weeks earlier, E was in the shower when she received a text message from unknown number. "I'm watching you." We never found out who sent that message. We went to the police with it, but they said it was impossible to trace. A few days after E's experience in the shower happened, I had my experience in the shower. I was in the shower, water running hot enough that the bathroom was becoming foggy. I could see the fog over the shower door. I heard the bathroom door softly open. Thinking it was my husband coming in, I didn't really pay it much mind. Then I heard what sounded like a giggle. I opened the shower door and looked out to find the room bathed in fog. Right in the middle of the fog was a very dense section in the outline of what looked like a figure. It was about 3 feet tall. I stood there and watched it lift what looked like an arm. I stood there, mesmerized. After a minute or so, the dense section started to spread out, becoming more like the rest of the fog. I closed the shower door and forced myself to finish my shower. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. A few minutes later, I tried to open the shower door without success. I shoved on it, kicked it, leaned against it. I could not open it. After a few minutes, I tried again. It popped open. The fog had completely dissipated. As I was getting out of the shower, I noticed the window curtain had a little opening in it, just enough where I could see my neighbor's back porch steps. Lounging on his elbow on the steps was a grinning, grayish, hairless, skinny, almost toothless, naked man. He waved. In a blink of an eye, he was gone. I've never told anyone about the guy. Never. He looked dead. I don't know if it was my imagination or some light trick that caused me to think I saw him. I just don't know. At my insistence, a few months later, my husband and youngest son demolished the shower and completely remodeled the bathroom.
What I'm about to tell you really happened, but you have to understand, many believe it did not. I will be honest with you, as I do not lie. This story is real, but you have to understand that on the evening in question, I had a lot to drink. I mean, a lot. Probably more than any other time in my life. Even more than the time I chugged half a liter of white tequila, just to prove I could do it. There are things I remember clearly about the evening in question, and others I don't. But this one event was very clear. There were 3 of us, 4 in total, including me. We had decided to get drunk and bought your standard easily packaged liquor and made our way to an old forgotten graveyard that was over 800 yards or so from the old gravel road. We had been there many times before, but only in the past, and we had never brought so much booze with us before. The graveyard is a great place to visit, always a foreboding feeling, and it makes the girls stay really close to you. It is kind of out in the middle of a field, surrounded by trees, which is what makes it odd. Nothing grows around it, but grass and your occasional wildflower here and there. Most of the stones are old, some dates on them, but others do not have them. The oldest we found dated back to 1918. The most recent that I can remember thinking about it was 1932. What is most odd is the number of stones that indicate children were buried there not over the age of 10. On this particular night, we decided and got right to drinking. We played your normal drinking games and did the normal stupid things associated with it. On this night, though, we got very drunk, and rather than exit the area to do our business as we had done before, we became lazy and did this on the gravestones and graves. I was the first to pay no mind, and as I was relieving myself on a particularly inviting stone, a friend said I should stop doing that. You know, 'cause it was disrespectful. I, being drunk by then, told them to bugger off, and that dead people should have more important things to worry about or consider. After a short while, it seemed that all except the girls agreed with me and did their business in the same way. I have to admit, looking back, I had not been so drunk, I had never would have done this kind of thing. Not because I would have been worried of anything happening, but because, looking back, it was disrespectful. Later that evening, I was propped up against a stone, and Natasha, one of the girls I had come with, was by my side as I peered through the slits in my eyes at the others and the fire we had built. They were laughing, jumping over the fire, and doing stupid things and the like. Jim, one of my best mates, looked in my direction, and I thought he was going to say something. Instead, his face turned to horror, and he started screaming. He backed into the fire about a third time. He said this, and tripped and fell into it. It was not a large fire, but his shirt instantly ignited, maybe because he had spilt some of the booze on it. I jumped up at this time, somewhat freaked out that he had been screaming to help him up, and put out the flames. As I moved closer, he rolled out of the fire saying, "Oh my God, get it away from me! Get it away!" The others asked, "Jim, what are you talking about, get it away?" And to this, he only started crying and blubbering. As I attempted to get him off the ground, the others who were doing the same mentioned it was getting very cold. They could not believe how cold it was. I asked them what they were talking about, because it was just as warm as it had been, when a silence fell over my friends. Bob, who was there first, said in a timid voice, Did you hear that?" Stuttering, I looked at him and said, "What?" His face grew ashen. My friend, who was holding Jim up, let go and dropped him. For a second, as if slow motion, everyone paused, and then they all took off on the road, screaming and hollering. Natasha, who had been behind me, started screaming, "Don't leave me!" And some of the others screamed back as they ran, "Run! Oh my God, run!" And so she began to, but as she got closer to me, I was still standing there now, believing they were playing a joke, and she started blubbering. "Oh God, Jim, don't let it hurt me. Please, please, please don't let it hurt me." As Jim slowly stood up, I looked into her eyes with a smile, trying to tell her the joke was up, but as I looked at her, I saw a face full of fear that alone scared me as well. I choked out, "What's wrong?" just in time to hear the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard. She rushed past me, reaching for Jim's hand, and as she took it, she tripped over my leg, making me lose my balance. I would not have normally done this, except for the fact I was very pissed. I stumbled back, and to this day, I do not know what I tripped on. All I remember is falling backward and everything going completely black. I awoke the next morning, face down in a ditch, halfway between there and my home. As I stirred, I heard laughter and thought that someone was standing over me. I could barely think and felt like puking. As I stood up, I remember that my clothes were wet and that I smelled of urine. I thought of, great, I urinated on myself while I was passed out. However, upon closer inspection, I was soaked from head to toe with it. I looked around to see who was laughing and believing the same person had probably relieved themselves on me. I saw no one around. I began walking the rest of the way home, and when I got there, after hosing myself off, I called Natasha and asked her what happened the night before. She asked what I was talking about, and I told her what happened. She said no one had gone to the graveyard in over 2 weeks, and had certainly not gone the night before. To this day, I don't even know how to conceive this, or what actually happened that night, or if it actually happened. The 320 Walker. Minnesota nights can be breathtakingly cold, and are normally so dark you can't see 10 feet in front of you. But when the moon is able to sneak out from behind the winter clouds, its reflection glistens off the snow-covered ground and lights pathways deep into the forest. I grew up along a beautiful lake in a country setting. It was serene and a beautiful place to make childhood memories. However, the house that we lived in had its eccentricities. One particular late-night winter proved that our family was not living in the house. After a couple hours of evening television, our family retired to our separate bedrooms. My brother to his at the end of the hallway, my parents and baby sister to the master and me, the first room off the dining room. It had been a long day, and I was exhausted. As normal, I left my bedroom door open, just a crack, so that my small dog could enter it if he needed to, undetected, and snuggle up for the night. I turned down the bedspread and jumped into my bed, falling asleep immediately. Oddly, I was awakened in the middle of the night. I was not in a daze, as if just coming out of a dream. Rather, I was alert immediately. I glanced at the clock on the dresser, which was glowing 3:20 a.m., in its digital red numbers. The moonlight was filtering through the night. Then I heard a noise in my basement, below my bedroom. It was a familiar noise, but strange at the same time. The basement was not carpeted, but had a full apartment, which used to house the previous owner's son. The apartment was separated from the downstairs laundry by a large, solid wood pocket door, which was always kept open while we lived in the house. The pocket door had been installed many years before on a sturdy metal track which had a distinct rolling sound as the door was opened or closed. This is the noise I heard. I wasn't immediately alarmed by the noise in the basement. My mom had been known to wake up early to do laundry before I was old enough to help. So I listened for a moment, closing my eyes and wanting to go back to sleep. It wasn't until I heard the footsteps on the wooden stairs leading from the basement to the kitchen that I knew this was not my mom. My heart started to race. I listened more intently to the heavy, methodical steps being taken by the intruder as they came closer to the landing in the kitchen at the top of the stairs. The footsteps did not stop at the top of the stairs. They continued across the kitchen in the same rhythm. The sound was eerie and is still vivid in my memory today, 30 years later. They didn't get any louder as they crossed, as I expected they should if the intruder was coming toward my room. All of a sudden, they stopped. Oh my God, the intruder was on the carpet. I yanked my bedding over my head, expecting the worst, barely breathing from the fear that I was to be discovered. I laid there stiffly so that I wouldn't move. There was nothing. My door didn't swing open. No more footsteps, no voices. It seemed like a lifetime, but I gradually dozed off. At the breakfast table the next morning, I nonchalantly asked my mom if she had been up wandering around the previous night. To my amazement, she screamed and started crying. She asked what time. I told her. Through her tears, she said she heard the exact same thing for the past 4 nights at the exact same time. To this day, we have no idea what or who it was, but we didn't hear it again after that conversation. The abandoned mine in the Mendenhall Valley. Most of the paranormal encounters I've shared have occurred in my home. This one, however, took place miles from my home, and only I was the witness. I live in the Mendenhall Valley in Juneau, and the high school I attended is downtown, so it's quite a ride just to get to school and back. Sometimes, my family and I go for a car trip and just drive around downtown out of sheer boredom. On this occasion, it was my parents' anniversary, and my dad wanted to show my mom this neat trail he'd noticed while at work. We all got in the car, me, my brother, and our parents, and drove downtown. The trail leads up one of the mountainsides, and the hike, if you can go all the way, takes about a day. We decided to just walk up the trail to the old entrance to one of the mines that are scattered around here. All of these mines are closed down, and have been for decades. Because of this, they are dusty and dark and just plain creepy. Anyway, once we got to the old mine, outside, there was this little exhibit that showed some of the old tools used in the mines. My parents and brother were checking that out while I wandered around aimlessly. I seemed to have a short attention span. I started kicking this rock around, and it happened to land inside the mine. I followed it, and then I realized where I was. There was this rusted gate that had the sign, "Closed, do not enter," and stuff like that. About 10 feet or so past the gate was this really big pile of rocks that sealed off the rest of the shaft. I'd assume that this was one of the many mines that had caved in. It was mild afternoon, so when I started to get a chill, I noticed almost right away. The underground wind shifted direction, and instead of blowing towards me, it started to pull me closer to the gate. Inside, I could suddenly see 4 or 5 men dressed in these dirty white shirts and jeans with suspenders. They all had a pick on their shoulder, and they stopped walking as they seemed to notice me watching them. They had no eyes, just these black, empty holes, and I couldn't move. I was suddenly overcome with this feeling of absolute despair and fear. Simultaneously, the men stretched out their free hands and pointed their fingers at me, almost as if they were accusing me of something. Next thing I knew, my mom had a hold of me and was shaking me and yelling, "Tiffany, Tiffany, what's wrong? What happened?" I realized that I was out of the covered entrance to the mine, and I wasn't feeling quite so despairing. I answered my mom with, "I'm fine," or something to that effect. Apparently, while I was watching the men, my parents and brother had started to hike back down to the car. My mom noticed that I wasn't with them and went back to find me. Once she got back to the mine entrance, she heard me making this horrible noise. She told me that she ran and grabbed me, saying that I was deathly white and staring at something that wasn't there, and saying over and over, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." She pulled me away from the mine, and then I was fine. I don't even remember anything past seeing the men pointing at me, and I told her what I saw, but she didn't see the men and thought that I'd just had an episode or something. I forgot about it and didn't really think of it much. This happened in the middle of the day, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were nowhere near the river or our house. The more I thought about what I'd seen, the more I realized that those men must have died when the mine caved in. Why they accused me of it, I don't know, but I haven't gone there since. At least, not that far up the trail. The lower half is used as an outside run for gym class, and whenever I go on that trail, the spot behind my right ear starts to hurt, and it gets worse and worse until I almost can't stand it. Anyone have any insight into why I might be feeling that? Any input would be welcome. 2 years ago,
I moved into a rented house. It has a big forest as most of its backyard. It also has a pretty big sized shed. When I first moved in, I just always felt like I was being watched. There was this little knob that must have been in the shed when we moved in because we had no idea where it came from. I don't know if that is somehow related. Also, the blinds on the shed would always just be open a little bit, no matter how many times we fixed them. When I told my friend, she suggested we camp out in the shed to see if anything was actually haunting. We got together, me and 3 other friends, to stay the night there and try to get some proof. We also had my sisters inside the house with a walkie-talkie that could reach us. The whole time we were in the shed, we all had a very strange feeling like we weren't the only ones there. Nothing happened for a while, until it grew dark. That's when all of it happened. First, we tried to just talk it out loud and see if we got any responses. Nothing was really responding. Throughout the night, we took flash pictures. We decided to try and use the Ouija board. It was glow in the dark, so we turned off all the lights and recorded the session. Nothing really picked up besides answering the question, is there a spirit with us, with yes, and it moving the oracle to goodbye. We got this all on video. We then decided to try and use the EVP reader. My friend had brought one flashlight and used it to flash to communicate with the voice being heard. The ghost communicated a lot using this type of communication. From this, we were told that it was a boy about our age and he died at the spot before the shed was being built. While we were doing this recording, I was taking flash pictures. One I took of my friend, you can clearly make out a figure crouching over her. After we did the session with the EVP reader, we decided to record us summarizing what had happened. During that video, one of my friends said she saw a shadow walk past a window outside the shed. We all kind of brushed it off, not wanting to believe it. A few seconds later, my sister called us over the walkie-talkie, asking if we were the ones walking around outside. When we looked back at the video, after that night, we heard footsteps coming closer and closer to us. In the video, the lights sort of flicker as if someone walked in front of the light right next to us. We got really freaked out after my sister told us, and we went into the house for a little bit. After a little break, we went back out. When we went in there, my friend felt someone playing with her hair. We all weren't anywhere near her. We all felt an eerie presence, so we went inside. In my room, we felt an evil presence, and when we played the Ouija board again and again, we picked up something, but not a lot. It told us that it would kill us. We went to bed for that night. When we woke up, we all decided to go to the beach for the day to get everything off of our mind. With everything locked up, we left. When we came back, we checked on the shed. The chairs were flipped over, the table was moved to the corner of the room. The knob that I mentioned before was taken out of the drawer and put on the center of the table. The drapes were cut, blinds open, and paper shredded. We left a piece of paper in there just in case something would be written on it. It was torn to pieces and crumpled up and thrown in the corner. When my friend went to retrieve it, she was scratched bad up her leg. The Ouija board was opened up and in the center of the room. It had dirt all over it like it was dragged across the ground. There were handprints all over the air mattress made from dirt. We have pictures of it all. Nothing really happened for a while after that. Until now, things are starting up again. Doors opening, electronics being messed with, strange noises. Just the other day, me and one of my friends, who was there the night of the shed, were playing the Xbox Kinect. We had it on the body tracking tool you can use to recalibrate your sensor. We were not standing in front of it yet. There was a body figure sitting on the couch, tapping its feet and moving its arms. We have pictures and videos of this. One last thing. We also have been hearing this strange thing that we think is somehow connected to this. Every day, me and my friend hear a growl followed by a knock. We will hear from them at different times, but around the same time. A lot. More stuff has happened, but the important stuff has been mentioned. We were just wondering what kind of ghost we were dealing with, how to get rid of it, if it can harm us, etc. Creepy house and shed. My family and I moved into a cute yellow house back in 2009. It was quite perfect for our family of 7, except I was living with my grandfather. I visited on weekends and summers. Anyway, I was 11. Everything was normal at the time. It was about a year later that weird things started occurring. I noticed that something was off about certain parts of the house. My bedroom, for example, especially freaked me out. It didn't have electricity in it. The house was old and had bad wiring. I had to sleep with the window open just to get some airflow. I slept one night in that room with my cousin Erin. She was fast asleep, but I couldn't sleep at all. Then I felt like I was being watched. Now, our windows were really up off the ground. You'd have to get a ladder to break in. I turned and saw a giant shadow move across the room and out the window. I didn't sleep in that room again. But that was just the beginning. A few months later, I learned we had a friendly spirit that resided in our living room. The whole family felt safe in that room, and thinking it was the former owner, we named it Mr. Thompson. He would do the usual, opening doors, moving things, appearing at times even. But he wasn't the shadow I saw. One night, while I was eating and talking on the phone, I noticed a figure in the window. It was tall, slender, and walked in a stooped manner. It was outside and slowly walked across the window and disappeared. I was a little spooked, but not concerned. Now, we had a shed outside past the garage. My sisters and I did not feel right about it at all. My youngest sisters were toddlers at the time, and they refused to go near it. They said there was a scary man in it. I remember one time my sister Christina was going to jump off it in an attempt to break her leg. I, of course, was going to videotape it. She backed out and started to get down, but suddenly rushed forward. In the video, you can make out a face and hands behind her. We didn't go near it again. A few weeks after that, I was in my sister's room to sleep, and we were all half asleep when our noisemaker went flying across the room. No one touched it. At the time it was thrown, it sounded like someone was growling. A few months later, before we moved, my sister Christina and I were lying in our bed, wrestling and giggling. I suddenly had the urge to look out the window. Again, our windows are 8 feet off the ground, and what I saw stood taller than the window. It had its hands pressed up against the glass, looking in. It had slits for a nose. I couldn't see its eyes. It also had horns spiraling backwards, and it was looking at me. I screamed, and Christina bolted. That's when the knocking began. Whatever it was kept tapping at the glass. We didn't feel safe in our home anymore. Turns out, some punk Satanist teens had some rituals in this shed. I looked up the house history later on. It was a crime case of breaking and entering. Picture shows the signs they had painted and such. We moved 3 months later. I'm sorry this was so long, but I felt the need to share it. Thanks for reading. The presence in the shed. When I was a younger child, I was completely sure that there was something living in my shed. We live in a fairly nice neighborhood, but our house had a somewhat sketchy past. The former owner was a drug addict and frequently invited his friends, also drug addicts, to come over and get high. Years after he went to prison and we moved in, we'd still find needles scattered around the backyard. The house was in horrible condition when my parents found it, and was very cheap. My dad owns a company that builds houses for a living and decided he would buy it as a fixer-upper. The house was 1,000 times better by the time it was done, and is now just as nice as the other houses on our street. For many years, he left the shed in the corner of the backyard alone. The shed was a dingy little thing, painted in an off-white color that was almost all peeled off, revealing half-rotten planks of timber underneath. The window was smashed to pieces, and there was no lighting installed. Basically, it was the kind of place you'd expect something creepy to happen. Still, we stored all our stuff in there, and whenever I wanted to get my bike or outdoor toys, I'd venture to get in there. Even as a very young child, the place made me feel very uneasy. My skin would prick, and often I would dart in with my eyes half closed, grab whatever I wanted, and bolt out. It had a very weird feel to it, as if there was something in there that wanted you to leave, and strangely, a little sad as well. Even just looking at it from my balcony made me shiver. My siblings felt the same, and my little sister wouldn't even go near the thing. My mother asked my father several times to fix it up, but for a while he declined, not citing any particular reason. I often wonder if it was because he sensed something as well. The experience that to this day makes me steer clear of that shed happened when I was 10, a few years ago. It was in the early evening when I went in to get my sand buckets, intending to play in the sand pit until my mother called me. I was young for my age. The buckets were at the far side of the shed, and so I couldn't just grab at it and leave it as I usually did. Hesitantly, I wandered in and got my buckets. I turned around and the door was closed. I started to panic, as the door doesn't open from inside the shed. I pounded on the door, crying and shrieking, but nobody came out to let me out. I continued doing this for about 6 or 7 minutes, as it got darker, and I was terrified. Suddenly, I felt something behind me. I could feel it shifting, and I thought I heard it make grunting sounds, low, but somehow sounded painful. Like someone was in intense pain, but too weak to make much noise. Then the noises were all around me and sounded alternatively young and old, female and male. I had been frozen still, but I started trying to bang the door open. I was too scared to look behind me into the dark. I clutched at the window, but it was still broken, and I cut my hand a little. The groaning gave way to crying and what I think were words, but I couldn't understand it at all. Looking back, it sounded German or some other similar language. I was hysterical at this point and screaming at the top of my lungs. Finally, the door swung open and my dad pulled me out. He was furious, asking why I hadn't called him and why I was hiding from him as he looked in and hadn't seen me. I guess he assumed I was hiding in the corner or something, because he was the angriest I'd ever seen him. He dragged me inside, where my mom and siblings were gathered around the table. My mom's eyes puffy and red, and my brothers and sisters looking scared. Turns out, I'd been there for an hour or more. It felt quite short to me. What scares me is they couldn't find me at all, and my dad had peeked in the window. They should have been able to see me, but they didn't. Of course, they didn't believe me. My mom balked when I said I heard a voice, but as I went on, I think she chalked it up as some extreme fright hallucinations from being locked in and didn't investigate. I never went back into that shed after my dad renovated it. Seeing it now makes me feel literally sick to my stomach. It's oddly less of a scary feeling now than a very, very sad feeling though. I know something horrible happened in that shed, though what exactly, I have no clue. I would like to know, but I doubt anything will ever reveal itself.
Please leave a like, leave a share, and leave everything at the door that's bad and hateful. Anyway, guys, please leave a like, share, and comment below. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.